Hey, greetings and welcome. This is the Mona Israel SOULONOMiCS 101, the LEV project, and I'm simulcasting. I'm trying a new thing. I'm doing it on Google Hangouts Live so that it could be recorded, as well as Facebook Live on 5 Nubian Queens. So if you see me continually looking this way, I still see you, but I'm going to be doing it off a presentation. So welcome once again. I know it's been a minute since I've broadcasted on Facebook. I've just been grinding, as they say, working, and when I go into work mode, I kind of get quiet. But yesterday was the launch of the new Reimagined 2016 Roots miniseries. And for those who know, welcome. It was a remake of 1977, so it's going to be like 30 years now of the book. And actually, no, it's 30 years of the book, because the book came out in 1976 by Alex Haley, and the miniseries came out in 77. And so it did have other, and which we're going to talk about. But before I talk about that, I like to measure and see what's going on social media, right? So on social media, there is a whole, I'm tired. The same thing happened to Underground. So the Underground finished like about and greetings, everybody. Greetings, welcome. You know, I always like to say the hello, especially when I'm live streaming on Facebook. So greetings and welcome. We're going to talk a little bit about the Roots review, and I'm doing it a little different. After I'm finished, for those who are on Facebook, if you would like to see the actual presentation, you can go there too, but you'll hear the audio, so it's all good. And people were pushing back, as usual. I don't want to see it. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to talk about it. Here we go again, another slave movie. I believe in a news report is saying that Snoop Dogg said he wants to boycott it, and others are saying they don't want to see it and replace it with another narrative. What are your thoughts so far? What are your thoughts? Did you watch it? Is it just another slave movie? What did you see? That's a question. I'll start off with that. What did you see? What did you see in this movie? Feel free to let me know. You can put it in the box if you haven't, because unlike the Underground, they didn't stretch it out. So they actually compressed it into 4 days. So it's going to be 2 hours. So it's going to be 8 hours of total movie compressed into 4 days. And so tonight is another one. So without further ado, while you're thinking in your thoughts what you thought, there was people saying they was going between the NBA and Roots. And again, for those who don't know, we've been doing the LEV project for 6 months. It's going to be 6 months now. And it has totally changed the way I perceive these movies, these narratives. And so many other people have testified that it has helped them. And so I want to let you know that and I'm not even making this stuff up before I even get to it. That's how I said, you know what, I'm gonna just do a presentation, because all of these talking points are gonna be lost if I just try to go out of my head. I had 1, 2, 3, 4 pages of notes. I'm not making this stuff up. 4 pages of notes when I was watching it. That's why I was like, what did you see? Because I saw a whole lot. And I just want to say, on a human level, what we see is based on what information we have. And so if we don't take in any new information concerning slavery, if we don't learn to expand our understanding and process our feelings and emotions, then we are going to keep seeing the same thing. But once we get past that, trust and believe, we're going to see something else. And so I'm going to just start with the presentation right now. And I'm going to do it for those who are on the YouTube live. You're going to see it. For those who are on Facebook, you're going to hear it. And wait a minute. Hold on. Before I share the screen here. 1 second. Actually, no. I have to share my screen first. So let me share my screen with you guys, so that I could share with you what did I find in those 4 pages. What did I see in those 4 pages of notes? All right, here we go. And this is when we change the way we think about things, and when we change the way we see things, we get to understand a little bit more than, the same old, like they say, in our feelings, in our emotions, and missing certain things. So let me, hold on 1 second. Let the thing get big. Thank you for those who have just joined us. This is Amuna Yisrael. Oh, man, come on now. Hold on 1 second. And let me know online if you guys are seeing this presentation. Trying to make it. Roots, the remake. I watched the first 30 minutes. I had to turn it. Part of me wanted to watch the rest, but I couldn't finish. It came on earlier. That man arm getting cut off on the boat left me speechless. Hope it comes back. That's Faith, and you know that's my born name right there, Faith. So Faith Harrison, bring up yourself. Imuna is Faith. So that's my name mate right there. Hope it comes back on at a better time. It's coming on all throughout the week, and it's coming in all throughout the week, sis. And Seeley Watson, I'll be watching part 2 tonight, correct? And you know I will, with my pen and my paper in my hand. It's like, you know, when you were back in school and they would give you notes. Well, this is what I say. Take notes. Take notes. Let me see if I can go back here so that I can get the whole thing. It's hating on me right now. My apologies. They're hating on me right now to pull up the whole session. Yeah, I'll be watching because, again, for me now, every opportunity to watch shows me something that I need to understand a little bit more. So give me 1 second, 1 second, 1 second. Hold on 1 second. I'm going to stop presenting for 1 second so that I can pull this up for you guys. Google Docs. I need it to be on the broad screen. Of course, it will start acting up right now. For those who've just joined us, has anybody else seen the Roots? Were you in between? Was it something that had your attention? Is it the same old, same old? Bear with me while I have all that I wanted to remember written down so that I don't forget it. Because again, if you haven't seen, I did a lot more detail than the original movie, especially the slave ship scenes. Correct? I agree. They went back, and I'll just go a little bit off the dome while I'm trying to pull this up. They went back according to what they're saying, and because more information is available, or they're more willing in 30 years later to tell some more information concerning the historical value. And like Miss Seeley said, the historical value has been added on this one a little bit more. And if you know what you're looking for, you say, wow, yeah, you know what? And so as we read in the LEV project on it's, you know, we've been doing it online for free. As we've been doing it for 6 months, everybody complains about Black history, you know, but we don't want to put the time in to let the history be known, for us to learn it for ourselves. I see. Oh, okay. Yes. My mother named me Christine. Faith, she said she didn't know what she was going to name me, and the Holy Spirit spoke and it said that she should call me Faith, and I have to live up to it. Correct. Had to live up to my name, but I'm grateful. I have a beautiful daughter named Erica Murray. Thank you for that, Faith. It sounds funny calling somebody else a name that you've heard all your life, but yes, thank you so much for that. Indeed, it's a name, it's a wine, and that was part of the. This is what I'm gonna touch on a little bit, because that was also part of the lesson that they was telling you within the movie, if you could stomach past certain parts. Okay, so for our live streamers on YouTube, I think I'm ready now. Right. And so we're gonna go back and share the screen. Start screen share. All right, you guys should be seeing what I'm seeing, right? So it's the Roots remake. The first thing I noticed in the opening scene, and this is why I picked it, is because in the original story, they're saying that Kunta Kinte was originally Islamic, comes from one of the Abrahamic faiths. And so you see in these scenes, and you guys can't see it, so definitely, hopefully you'll see the presentation. You see that in these scenes, they had their head wraps. Everybody in the village had their head wrap. That's the first thing that stuck out to me. I'm like, oh, okay, they done switched it up on us, but now they're sourcing their material more. I haven't been able to trace my roots as of yet, but I know I'm a direct descendant of slaves. Miss Seeley Watts. Thank you so much, Miss Seeley. And this is what it does when we read these things and watch these narratives. It gets us to wondering about who we are. And it's important to wonder who we are, because without knowing who we are, we're not grounded. You understand? And so this is why I say, don't look away. Let's pay attention. And so this is the LEV Project Roots 2016 episode 1 review. Please look forward to more reviews coming up. And again, it's sponsored by the LEV Project, which is what you're watching and listening to right now. We put in 6 months, over 80-something hours of time, energy, and effort collectively. The Kane Cultural Clothing and Soul Center. But we'll talk about more about that in a little bit. The Roots, and I already just said, the Roots original series was 76. The original one that came out was 77. So I'm going to skip past that because I said that in the opening. Alex Haley got into a little controversy. Let me go back a little bit. If we don't know, there was a little controversy around the whole Alex Haley Roots because they were saying that he plagiarized and they actually took him to court. So if you're not familiar with that, look that up because they say he lifted some of these narratives, and big up to those who's giving all the hearts and the love. Big up to yourself. Thank you so much. He airlifted some of the narratives. Now, let me just say this. After reading a certain amount of narratives, you realize that there are a lot of things that are similar and a lot of things that are different. Everyone didn't have the same narrative. I just want everybody to please, please, please. When we look at Roots, we're looking at one person's story, one family story, one plantation. Each plantation was like its own and was its own business. It was its own enterprise. They had names. They were incorporated. We have to keep understanding that this was a business first and foremost, and hopefully those who are on can hear me, that it was a business. This is very key to understand. And let me just not wonder if you can hear me. Let me make sure that you can hear me before I proceed. And because what happens is when we see Roots, we're like, oh, that's everybody's story. That is not everybody's story. I'm sorry to tell you. And some of the slaves will beg to differ. They would say, that's not my story. I wasn't beat. It's not justifying inhumane behavior. It's putting a correct lens on what it is that we are seeing. So this was the story of Kunta Kinte. You understand? And this is why when you read the original book, it says the saga, the story of Kunta Kinte and his family on this particular slave plantation. And like I said again, I cannot stress it enough, for us to get past the point of thinking that this was everybody's reality, it wasn't. So I'm going to go ahead and proceed at this point just to make sure everybody can hear and see me on the Facebook, and then on the YouTube, and then I'll continue. So I said this was going to be a presentation because I realized that we have to step it up a little bit on our reviews and move away from, yeah, all right, cool. Sorry about that. Y'all have seen me go through all of that, but you can see me, so that's cool. Hold on one second. All right, and so I wanted to say that. Let me move on. Again, like I said, in the Memorial Day, they put it on Memorial Day. So a lot of us were like, why did they put it on Memorial Day? Social media objections. They're trying to get us to keep remembering this stuff. Why can't they get past this stuff? Like I said before, we should boycott this. We shouldn't listen. We shouldn't watch. We should replace it with our own story. What about Mansa Musa? What about Egypt? You know, what about the kings of Nigeria and on Ghana and all of this stuff we keep talking about? Again, deflection, 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 deflection. Not saying this is the only conversation, but this is the conversation that's happening now. And what we're doing is like you're in a relationship and you want to have a conversation about why you won't wash the dishes. And your mate is like, forget about why I won't wash the dishes, why you don't never vacuum the floor. You see, we're putting one conversation instead of dealing with what's on the table. We're like, I don't want to talk about that. Let's get back to this. We should replace it again. What they are trying to keep slave movies in our mind. Okay, granted, they had Django, they had 50 years and 12 years a slave. Again, they just had Underground. And so everybody's like, slave movie fatigue. I don't want to watch no more. It's too much. Blah, 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 blah. But the reality is, like I said, when I've been reading these narratives, one of these books is this. Like I said, I got them right here because, again, the LEV Project is always handy. And this is just one of them that they have, Weevils in the Wheat. You saw a lot of people saying, right out of, fresh out of slavery, like 2 seconds off the plantation. Why you want to talk about that? Let's forget it. And so we, the children of these enslaved individuals, has taken up that mantle to say, if I could just block out this trauma, if I could just live in denial and pretend like it didn't exist, then I don't have to deal with it. And the reality is it keeps resurfacing. And once we begin to look at how to deal with it, trust me, you're going to change. You are going to change for the better. But we have, but I know I'm a direct, exactly. That is, the manhood was something I was like, wow, that was they doing in the water, as it was really sad when he found the guy in the boat. But I love even he showed respect. And I'm reading a comment here, I'm sorry. Oopie. To his mom. What's up, Donna? How you doing? Donna Wallace, but we have the power to know both. Exactly. How is your history too much? Yes, that's my thing, Donna. Why does it has to be either or? That's my first thought. Like, why is it either or? Why is it not both? I have a brother who was a track star, and he had an injury. And you could talk about, how much I ran so fast before my injury, but if you don't acknowledge the injury and what you did to come back from this injury, and you only want to dwell on before the injury, that doesn't make sense either. So you have to understand that slavery, this whole slave era, is injurious on so many levels. So to keep talking about, I used to run like really fast, but now you can barely walk. Okay, let's acknowledge that at this point, you used to run fast, you can barely walk. What happened and how can we fix it? And the phone is ringing, but I'm gonna keep going right now. And somebody else said, I can't watch Kunta being beat, or many people said that they can't watch Kunta being beat. That was one of the original issues, and everybody for 30 years, everybody's like, what's your name? Everybody used it in jokes, they use it in storytelling, they use it in all things, because this was a scene that stuck out amongst the movie, them beating his name out of it. And one of the last things I picked up was, I just don't want to see this anymore. Let's get over it. Like I said, it's not the first time. That's the original issue. It's like, okay, we're in mourning, and when people are mourning, they mourn in different ways. Some people mourn, they get very angry, and there's different phases. And we don't want to believe it oftentimes, but in this space and time, as a people, we are still mourning for 400 plus years. And so I'm going to go ahead and proceed at this point. It says, these are my thoughts. So these are my thoughts, like I said, once again, on what it is that I'm seeing. The narrative opened up, correcting some things that it didn't say the first time around. The first time around, it doesn't give you the history. The narratives, like I said, we didn't read Job, we read Alexander Falconbridge. We're reading some Europeans accounts, and we're reading firsthand. All of the things that we're reading in the LEV project is firsthand. And the reality is, firsthand accounts are telling us that the Europeans and some Africans, not all, but some of the different tribes were complicit, coerced, or whatever it was. But at a certain point, they had to be in agreement. And so this was displayed in the very first scene of the Kunta Kinte roots narrative. Like, okay, for those who are listening, this is not surface. So please bear with me, because we're about to go in a little bit deep, because we had enough of the surface. I think I want to know in conversation. We're going to go in a little bit deep. So bear with me. And I'm passionate on this subject. So like I said, bear with me. So this is reflected in the very first scene. They said they wanted to make it more historically accurate. And so they have the conversation that some villagers who wanted to make some money, you understand what I'm saying? They were lured in by the promise of guns, which equal power, and trinkets, which equal status and esteem, to begin to sell their slaves. This is facts. This is historical facts, and people don't want to believe. We want to believe, oh, the European did it all by himself. Impossible. They went through sometimes 3 days journey into the interior. The European didn't do that. There was a whole trade network that they called fairs, where they would bring people in. Again, like I said, where am I getting this from? I'm broadening in my mind, bringing in more history so that I can be able to, and we can be able to source what we're seeing. And so they would have these fairs where they would have them in the interior and walk you like 3 days journey plus to the coast to be sold. And along that trade route, it was melanated people doing it. And there was other accounts that said when the ship, before the ship could dock, they had to get permission from the ruling class to come off and come off and begin to trade. So in the movie, if you missed the first episode, please watch the first episode, because in that episode you're seeing they're having a conversation between Kunta Kinte's father and the dissonance by saying you don't have permission to sell slaves. They knew it was going on. It's like people know that drugs is going on in the community. Everybody knows that drugs are going on in the community. Some are complicit or some are not. But if you come on somebody's block who you don't have permission to be on, and you're not paying your taxes on that block, they're going to run you off. Understand there's nothing different that happened in the slave trade. Okay, and I'm gonna read comments in a minute. Donna said, yes, we must be willing to acknowledge and fully explore our entire history. It's so multifaceted and diverse, the pains and the triumphs. Donna, I'll give you like 50 thumbs up on that one. I totally agree. We have to be willing, an hour a day, 5 hours a week, something, so that we can stop saying slavery, bad, really, really bad. We need to be able to, for our purpose, source more than that. But let me continue here. Kunta's family and village being Islamic, I said that already. That's something that they added in. The women's attire was different. I said that, and the ceremonies and customs. So understand that they're showing you that there was a whole paradigm in place. There was a whole tradition. There was a community intact, communities intact. Okay. And when that was disrupted, like in Kunta's situation, you see him struggling to kind of resolve that. Like, wait a minute, you know, I know about, you know, like I said, attitudes of fatherhood, attitudes of birth. They took these things. The first scene that you saw there, those were the midwives. Those were the women rallying around Kunta's mother when she's going to bring forth child. All of these things were stripped away in their working order and became dysfunctional. So when we want to talk about the injury, like somebody, you got a lawyer come in, they want to know when did this happen? You got to go in and examine the injury. This is what we're doing. This is why we can no longer afford as a people to just look away. Again, like they had in the original version, manhood and warrior initiation. It wasn't just all of a sudden, I'm a man. You had to go through steps. It wasn't all of a sudden, I'm a woman. You had to go through steps into womanhood. You understand? Those things we have lost. Children are now becoming parents without the proper training. And there's no wonder that we're failing. Again, we're identifying now, not just looking at, oh, wow, that's a pretty scene. That's pretty cool. We're actually extracting out what that means within our mind, within our heart, within our soul, within our structure. What's wrong with quote unquote Black people? A whole lot. You know, marriage customs, again, him and the guy was fighting. They had their eye on the same girl. You didn't just lure somebody in. You had to go through the proper channels, even if you were interested in that individual. Nothing like what's happening today. No kicking it on social media. We see that there was an order. This is all what I saw out in the first 2 minutes. Kunta expressing a desire to attend university. For those who want to talk about Mansa Musa, Nigeria, Kings of Ghana, Egypt, they're putting in there, and I don't believe it wasn't actually the first one or whether they took artistic license, but they're showing you that Timbuktu showed people what a university is. This was a center, a mecca, a haven for higher learning. They had the arts, they had literature, they had everything. And so he's saying, guess what? I don't want to be within the village. And this was in Africa. It was a distance, but it was in Africa. And so he's saying, hey, I want to go to the university. How many people caught that when he's having a conversation with his parents? This is how, in their estimation, or the way they're retelling the story, how he got caught. Is that he went to go check the girl because he wanted to marry her and he wanted to go to university. Anywho, this is like I'm saying, when we're watching it, we watch it with a different lens and we're able to extract so much more. It says, again, something I found interesting, 2 days that are most important in a man's life, the day you are born and the day you understand why. Listening to the narrative, listening, and they said Kunta is going to understand more. Both. I find it very necessary, and I do it with my children, to speak about what happens before they were born. Tell them about their history. Tell them about their birth story. Give them something to remember. Plant something in their spirit. Let them know whatever the truth is, because they're going to look for it, whether or not you give it to them or not. It's a void in the soul when you as the parent, you as the caretaker, you as the grandparents do not fill in the blanks for them. So Kunta's parents infused him with this understanding of self and origin. Like, how can I look away? You know, why am I looking away? Because all of this tells the narrative of how we arrived on these shores. If we just cut the pieces, then we're not going to really understand the story. And his story is just one of millions of stories. So they repeatedly tell him his story. That's why when he gets here and they're trying to beat it out of him, he says, no, I am Kunta Kinte of Jifere, of such and such. My parents are such and such. My How many of us can do that? And why can't we do that? Because we have disconnected, but it's not too late to begin to reconnect those pieces that have been severed, and let your children know going forward who you are, and then make your name respectable. So when they repeat this, it's a source of pride. It's a source of dignity for them. Next slide. I'm trying not to stay too long for you guys, but I had to go to this level for this review because, like I said, I didn't want to forget nothing. It says the intro scenes shows tension between the tribes. I already spoke about that. Some of the things that lured in the Europeans. All of this stuff is verifiable. So definitely do the research. And like I said, when he ran into the river during his manhood training, they saw other people being taken captive, but these were oftentimes neighboring villages, and everybody at a certain point during the slave trade was on edge. The tribal and the village people were on edge, like, wow, they're wondering if their village is going to be next. This is why during the training they said, hey, let's go back. We got to do the initiation quick, which was the circumcision, because they're Islamic, they're Muslim. They had to do the initiation, that final sign of the covenant, and go back, because they had to go back and protect their wives and children. They're warriors, and that's what their job is. But as Kunta is running into he sees somebody he knows. And he runs back and tells his family, like, wow, this thing is close, because I know his face. I know that person. And sure enough, he was one, as well as his uncle, in the narrative who is captured. A real life narrative is The Adventures of Venture Smith. And I'll put that link in the box, because this is something that you could pull up the documents and the PDFs for. That's the babies. They're up now. I was trying to do this before their nap time, but hey, it works like that. So The Adventures of... Go ahead. The Adventures of Venture Smith, he tells you the narrative kind of similar to Kunta Kinte's, how he was a prince in his village. They got invaded. He was captured and brought to America. Again, real life slave narrative. I will continue. No, I said here was something that was interesting. It says there is a word. This is what one of the warriors said. There's a word for a Mandinka warrior who is unprepared in battle. And he said it's a slave. Okay, and that's very interesting, because they weren't foreign to the slave concept or the indentured servant concept. And the reason how you know that, even in this narrative, when Kunta gets captured, oftentimes it wasn't for life. So when he gets captured, he says to them in the subtitles, like, how long do I have to serve you? And a lot of people, a lot of Europeans came to America under indentured servitude. And we know that they serve for 7 years and then they go free. That was the original arrangement. And when they realized in America, little American history, that, you know what, they promised, when I let you free, I'm going to give you this, that, and that. And they was like, hey, that's eating into our bottom lines. We can't keep letting go these indentured servants, because we ain't really got the money like that for them. They said, you know what, slave labor. But they were already providing slave labor to the Caribbean and South America. But that's another story for another day. So the Europeans, as well as certain Africans, reduce one another to a monetary value. And this is why we say oftentimes, and people, again, we get in our feelings, but this was straight up business. It was a business enterprise for them to get free labor to produce crops to get a profit. Let me continue. Everything was forced for someone else's benefit. How does this affect us today? Because if we are coming from people who were forced to do things, coerced to do things, manipulated into doing things, guess what? Today, you are still forced to do things, manipulated into do things, and coerced into doing things. It's just on a different level. So on the slave ship, when Kunta refused to eat, they forced him to eat with physical means. They put the screw thing in his mouth and tried to, and there's some narratives who says that they would throw hot molten lava or lead into the throats. They would do like what you saw, or they would take a metal thing and burst their teeth out to force them to eat. Now you would ask the question, why would they do this? Here's the thing. Remember, it's about business for them. And so if you die, they already paid for you on the shores, okay? So this is an investment, and the captain, the slave captain, has a certain amount he's making an investment. Or sometimes they have these agreements with certain countries to deliver a certain amount of slaves per year. And the name of what it is going to Acento de Negros. Sorry. So these were, if you look it up, Acento de Negros, look that up. Babies. You will see that certain people were contracted to get a certain amount of slaves per year. And so if the cargo dies before it gets there, then that amount was lost. It's like perishable goods. So forcing them to eat was to make sure that I kept you alive long enough to get back more than what I paid for you, even though I stole you. They were forced to dance. And again, this was for reasons for exercise, because again, they didn't want the limbs to atrophy. On this narrative, it says 87 days later from the time he entered in. So you could understand 30, 30, and 30, it's nearly 3 months. So they don't want your muscles to atrophy before they can get, so they're going to force you to dance, force you to eat, and they force the women to be defiled. The slave man will just come down, pick up the woman that he wanted, and then force her. And we see that happening with Kunta, because this was the woman he wanted to marry. I forgot her name right now. And so because this is the woman, Fanta, I believe her name is, from the old one, I remember Fanta. So because this is the woman that he wanted to marry, he said, let me fight for her, but he was held back. One time. He said, let me fight for her, but he was held back from doing so because he was in a powerless position. Translate to today. 1 second. I'm sorry. If we translate that into today, imagine generations of not being able to fight for your woman, for your females, for your family. What does that do to the mind of someone who used to be a warrior, who used to be a prince, who used to be nobility in your ego? It's just like today, if a man could not provide, oftentimes he's going to lash out on his children. He's going to lash out on his wife. He's going to lash out on his household. He's going to be angry. Why? Because the very nature, his very purpose of a provider and a protector, he's not able to accomplish that purpose. And so that energy is going to be internalized, or it's going to be projected to destroy those in and around him. So keep that in mind. Like I said, hold on 1 second for me, please. So like I said, why we cannot continue to look away, because this holds the key to understanding what happened and what is continuing to happen, and why we behave, the pathology, and why we behave the way we do. And so he said, let me fight for her. And there are countless times in these narratives, and these narratives, and these narratives that we need to read, and many more narratives. They said they would get out the way because they didn't want the beating. They didn't have the weapons. Go ahead. They didn't have the weapons. They didn't have the means. The men didn't have the ability to protect. And so there is a term called learned helplessness. How many people know that term that they use, learned helplessness? It's weird. And I saw a wild thing, not to get off the topic, but there was this wild test of mostly Europeans in this class. And what happened was they had two set of people. One set of people had the right answers, the correct answers to be able to complete the quiz. The other set of people, they planned it where they didn't have the correct things in order to complete the quiz. So after asking them a certain amount of questions, I think it was 3 questions, after just 3 questions in this experiment, by the 3rd question, those who kept getting it wrong because it was rigged, they decided not even to try anymore. And they call that term learned helplessness. but they only use it and apply it for others. Like a lot of these terms that they come up with, they know that it exists, but it's not for you. It's not for I. It's not to say, really, if you keep eventually the person is going to say, well, you know what, I'm not even going to try. So after years of saying, I can't fight for you, they're stopping me from fighting for you, guess what? You know what? Handle your own business. And generations will come who learn this behavior and said, you know what, I'm not even going to get involved. Like I said, where is it coming from? This Kunta Kinte story is just a microcosm. It is just an example. It's not all of the entire institution, but it gives a good narrative. So for those who just joined us, I'm halfway through my thoughts because, like I said, it's a lot. Yes, I saw all of this as I was watching. It says, on slave ships in a captured and destitute, many say they didn't have a desire to live. There was depression. You were ripped away from your family, from your children, from everything you know. That sets in a lack of will or a desire to live in many. There was a man he was chained to. He said he was 2 months in the belly of this ship. He didn't want to live. So many of them didn't love. We see that learned helplessness. We see that destitute of spirit. And we see that depression even today, where people do things that are counterproductive, that are against living. Y'all gonna have to bear with the babies back there because, you know, it's past nap time. So this is why I only do things at certain times, but it's all good. We're going to rock with it. Again, where is it coming from? It's coming from this place. And how do we deal with it? This is what we're talking about now. Again, now there was some who was like, I'm going to fight. And many times there were planned insurrections. There's been times where they've taken over the ship and steered it back, only to be caught again and to be sold back into slavery. Again, there's reports from sea captains who will tell you some of the stuff that you're seeing that they put in this narrative. Like I said, again, objectification. Once you got here, before you got here, you were objectified 3 times. Sorry, objectified 3 times. The first time you were objectified, and we were objectified, and our ancestors were objectified, was within the confines, actually on the continent. You understand what I'm saying? In your villages, in your places where you begin to see one another as prey. We see that here. It's not distant. We see that in certain low-income areas. We see that in what people call ghetto. When you walk with a gold chain or you walk with a new jacket, you are no longer Raheem. You are no longer Terry. You are no longer Keisha. You have become objectified. You got that fly jacket. You got that nice chain. I like your J's, son. This is the same objectification. Why are we acting like, oh, no, it was only the European? No. So therefore, in this space and time, guess what they began to see? They began to see, oh, you that gun I'm about to cop. Oh, you that nice beaded trinket. Oh, you that nice barrel of rum I'm about to cop. We began to objectify one another through greed and lust of the spirit. Let's not front because it's still happening this very day. This is my thoughts, okay? Thank you, darling. The babies got me water. I guess I'm talking a lot. They got me water. Okay, just wait. Sorry. So that's the first. That's the first level of objectification. When you got on the slave ship now, you became cargo. You became that what do they call it? The precious commodity, only in the sense that I need to transport you to market. It's like when somebody's transporting vegetables or fruits, I'm treating you as these perishable items. And all that you represent in the mind of the ship captain and the crew was this perishable item that I need to get to market. So that's the second objectification, like you became this object. On the third one, when you got to market, you became the breeder, you became the laborer, we became, our foreparents became the servants. So we understand that it's on different levels for everyone who's involved in this train or in this line of servitude, or so to say. Everybody sees you for a different reason. It's like right now in marketing, you go outside, everybody sees you as a customer, but for different reasons. The fast food, they market to you because they see you as, if I could get you hooked, then this is what it's going to mean. The doctors, they market to you because if I could get you hooked, this is what it's going to mean to me. Do you understand what I'm saying? Hopefully you do. So I'm a proceed. All of this I got from the 2 hours of roots. Like I said, if we change the way we look at things, the way we look at things begin to change. And we see such value in the actual imagery of it that looking away is like a disservice. It's like when people go to the law school or where they become a doctor, they love to get an opportunity to dissect something. They're like, ooh, we get to dissect it. We actually get to use the knowledge that we've been learning to see how this thing works. The mechanic, the architect, they go into the house. Architect ain't looking at, oh, wow, that's really pretty stucco you got there. The architect is like, okay, that's the load bearing beam right there. I see what you did here. You vault, see, you understand what I'm saying? And this is what we kind of need to do when we're looking into this narrative and get out of our emotions and feelings so we can actually use this for the betterment of ourselves and our people. One thing, when the guy went up to Kunta and felt on his scrotum, looked in his teeth, we see that over and over and over again in the slave narratives. But I don't know if, what I found out is they called it a scramble. Again, remember, you are months in the hole of the ship. Okay, you've been there for a really long time, right? You may be atrophied. You may have injury. They take this lard and they try to shine you up so any injury doesn't appear. But in what they call a scramble, and they illustrated it for us, but if we don't know what we're looking for, we don't see it. So what they call a scramble is they make it dark. It's kind of like when you go to buy your meat at the store and they put that ill red light to make you actually think it's fresh, but it's really brown. Same tactics. So they made it dark. And they made it like a Black Friday kind of way, a free for all. And they called it a scramble. You can look it up. And so what they would do is the adrenaline is so high. What they wanted to do was hide the fact that these people are diseased. When you saw the fact that he touched his behind, what happened was sometimes these ship captains or these slave traders would plug their behinds. Because they would have, what's the name of the word? If anybody remembers, please tell me. They would have this diarrhea, let's say, because of the sickness and they called it another word I can't remember right now. And so they would plug their behinds to make sure that they didn't have diarrhea. That if they bought them in a few days, they would die because they were already ill. So they had all of these little tricks of the trade. And we read that in one narrative. And the narrative escapes me. Check out the LEV project if you want to know, because right now the narrative escapes me. But my point of the matter is, this is the tricky stuff they would do. So this is why you see him touching his behind to see if, okay, do you have diarrhea? Looking all in your teeth to make sure that you're not sickly. And because it's a scramble, you saw him took the little sheet or whatever and pulled it over him. It's like Black Friday where everybody's grabbing it. Oh, this is mine. This is mine. You just excited to get a deal. This is what they were doing, and this is what you are watching. Okay, let me continue. Past that point, when Kunta was purchased and taken, he couldn't understand. He was like, well, wait a minute. I only see one European and all these Black people, but y'all not doing nothing. Why are they not running, he said in the subtitles. And this is for us to see that once they broke, because later on they say you can't buy a slave. You have to make a slave. So understand that it was a systematic, like we know, everybody likes to quote Willie Lynch, but it's so much deeper. But Willie Lynch is the surface understanding that it was systematic. We saw it on the ship where he was like, we have to make an example. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped over the insurrection when everybody was like, you know what? Those who are going to fight, let's fight. And they said, you know what? We can't have this. One of the most greatest fears of the European is retribution, because in their heart of hearts, they know that, they just did something terribly wrong. So they're always in fear of this uprising, of this retribution. Here comes the demonization. Here comes the, blackballing. Here comes all of the things to convince society that you're just this barbaric individual. But if you remember, Kunta says, take us back. That's all I'm asking you to do. You created this imbalance. There is no more homeostasis in my environment. And a lot of times this rebellion is the saying to take us back, restore. This is, we get reparations, we get this restoration. And so He's not understanding that they already went through the slave making process. And so he's confused. It's just like those who are waking up now, waking up in increments, who still don't understand why others are still in this slave process. But it is a process to do. It was a process to do, as we saw later on when they gave him to Fitler to try to break him in. So understand it isn't a process to undo. So basically, one more thing on that, when he tried to run off the wagon, right? The other slave, he objectified him as well, or the enslaved individual. He didn't see Kunta as my brother. He saw Kunta as the person who's going to get me in trouble because they have made me responsible for you staying in your slave state. So understand that when they saw people like Malcolm X and Marcus Garvey, the process was already there. It was already, so they looked at Malcolm X and Marcus Garvey as someone who's going to get us in trouble because of this learned helplessness. There's no way out, and you represent retribution from the European once they say that we are trying to escape, once they see that we do not like this slave process. Because one thing that the narratives tell us is, part 2 is tonight. Yes, Stephanie Miller. And hopefully we try to process part 1 because it was so much. But greetings and welcome. Part 2 is tonight at 9 o'clock. One thing that I found out that the Europeans say is this. They wanted you not only to be enslaved, they wanted you to be enslaved and like it. Understand what I just said? So there are some firsthand accounts that say they couldn't hear you singing about freedom. They thought that was an insult. They didn't want to see you not smiling. They thought that was an insult. So you were being indignant. You understand what I'm saying? You were being high-minded. You were not content with your position as a slave. You were not content with what a little bit I was giving you. All of this goes into the experience today. What more do you people want? You know, we gave you affirmative action. You know what I'm saying? We gave you, what more do you people want? This is still the mentality, the indifference towards what actually, and I often said it, I don't know if you guys have ever heard me say it. For me, the best way for me to understand the institution of slavery as it was is domestic violence. When you look at domestic violence, where so much research has been done, when you look at traumatic bonding and what happens with the Stockholm syndrome within a domestic violence situation, you will understand the white, quote unquote, and black dynamic. But I'm going to continue so I don't keep you guys much longer, because I could go on. As you see, I could go in on this stuff. It says, here's another thing. Because Kunta was infused with some type of structure and morality, which is all going to be stripped in this institution, when the girl approached him and said, she offered herself, you can have me. So she now has become the floozy. She has become the loose individual. But she didn't just become that way. As you saw on the slave ship, they began to make you that way. They said, hey, you are not worthy of marriage. You are not worthy of that institution. You are not worthy of these emotions and feelings. You don't really feel, you're not really a person. Again, they had to justify what they were doing. So they had to objectify you to less than a person so that they could kind of possibly sleep at night. And so they would say, you're not a person. And she began to believe it. Okay, Yafet, bless up yourself. Yafet, thanks for joining us. I'm doing a breakdown of the first episode of Roots because usually I go off the head. But today it was so much. I quickly put together a little presentation. If you're watching it on Facebook, when I'm done, I'll put the link so you can see the slides, or you're just hearing me. That's all good. The slides is just to remind me. So he told the woman no, because a child born here is only a slave. He's like, I'm not interested in you being my jump off. Because he was born and raised to say, hey, no, you have to be a father. You have to take care of your family. You have to do all of these things. These things were stripped away. You understand? You were convinced that you're not capable. You were told that master's the one who's going to provide for your family. And we have a lot of men and the family dynamic, not all, but a lot who has gone into that dynamic to say, people like, well, we got to talk about slavery because you still got the mind. You still have the mind. The government will take care of you. Massa will take care of you. I don't have to provide you food, clothes, and a shelter. Massa will do that because Master only required one thing, you to work for him, oftentimes, and for you to make more babies for him. And so at this point, when he said, here a child only will be a slave, The Elizabeth Keys case comes up, and Elizabeth, let me see if I have any, I'm not neglecting. We have, at the end of the day, this root series is necessary. It's our history, it's our truth. I'll definitely be tuning in. And I have 100% that God's exist. Click on my channel. Okay, I'm gonna go back here. Thank you for those who have tuned in. Let me make sure I'm still sharing my screen. Am I still? Yeah, I'm still sharing my screen with you guys. Okay, and so hold on. Let me make sure here. Are you okay? All right, go back that way. I'm coming, baby. I'm almost finished. They're like, mommy, so I'm coming. The status of the child follows the mother. That was an actual ruling. So I have a little thing. I've said it many times on the LEV project. Bless up yourself, Stephanie. Give thanks. You know, it's all about the edification. You know what I found? Side note. What happened in the conscious community, or the awakening, or those who are beginning to awake, what I found is, and it's an African proverb. This African proverb stuck with me. It says, if you want to go far, go alone. No, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. When I heard that, I just had to sit back and just resonate on it. Because here's the thing, education is beautiful. Education helps and it opens doors. But oftentimes, like we said, we have brain drain in the community. One person gets educated, they go far, they advance in their life, in their personal environment. But as a community, oftentimes, more often than not, they don't come back, because now that is their success. Again, that's part of the system as well. And when we go together, meaning when we have these type of discussions, when I don't just go off in my little closet and read all my books, and then I come back and say, hey, this is all I know, and this is why you should listen to me. When I actually say, let's read this together, let's have this experience together, so that we can, when we are communicating, we are not misguided. We understand one another. Because guess what? We both had that same experience, and here it is. When you're in school, they say it's your classmates. And when you leave school, you still remember your classmates. Why? Because you went through that process of learning collectively. And so this is why I think it's so important. But anywho, the Elizabeth Key Grinstead, this status in America changed. It wasn't always like this. First time, when they first came here in the early 1600s, this is another thing we need to understand. In the early 1600s, the status of the child did not follow the mother. And here's why that's important. Because at first you weren't slaves. When they realized that you were slaves, what was happening was the Europeans were intermarrying with, quote unquote, black people. And what was happening with the Europeans intermarrying with black people is that they were like, oh no, oh no, oh no, no, no. How are we going to tell who's a slave and who's not a slave? How are we going to be able to deal with this stuff? And so they invented race, this race construct. Before the race construct, there was nationality. This is why I don't like the term black. There was nationality, and we see that represented in the Kunta Kinte story, because the Irishman, he clearly has an Irish accent, was the lower indentured class when they first came here. And what happened is that oftentimes they felt that they were better than the quote unquote blacks. So they had to put a separation. You had Irishmen, you had Englishmen, you had Frenchmen. This is how, wait a minute, 1 second. This is how you identify. But they pulled a snafu. They pulled a hocus pocus on everybody. They was like, forget that. What we're going to do is separate everybody on color, so that we will understand, so that we can keep a handle on this thing. So in this Elizabeth Key Grinstead case, you can look that up as well. When these Europeans were having children with, they had like bastardization laws where you had to take care of your child. The man was responsible for clothing, food, and shelter, and sending that child to school or teaching that child a trade. You understand? If that child was black, if he laid with a black, quote unquote, black woman, it didn't matter. And so Elizabeth Creed Grinstead, it says, was one of the first women of African ancestry in the North American colonies to sue for her freedom from slavery and win. This was in 1655. It says Elizabeth Key won her first freedom and that of her infant son, John Grinstead, on July 21st, 1656 in the colony of Virginia. She sued, check it out, based on the fact that her father was an Englishman. It doesn't say her father was a white man. Her father was an Englishman and that she was a baptized Christian. Based on these two factors, her English attorney and common law husband, William Grinstead, argued successfully that she should be freed. The lawsuit in 1655 was of the earliest freedom suits by a person of African ancestry in the colonies. And you could go looking into this, but here's what I want to, here's a little piece of history. In response to Key's suit and other challenges in 1662, so in response to her saying, wait a minute, the law is your father's free, you're free. This was what the law used to be. This is what they established it on. And they sued and they won. I think she was married to a European. So they sued and they won. And the courts, because again, they were forming these laws as they went along. It wasn't one big fat slavery law. Boom, it's slavery, it's over. That wasn't the case. It was incremental. And so in 1662, the Virginia House of Burgesses passed a law that the status of the children born in the colony would follow the status of the mother, born or free. Your mother free, you free. Your mother is a slave, you're a slave, rather than the father. And here is what it did. What it did was made a built-in system where every child that was born from the slave mother was masters. So back to today, when the system says, hey, this child that is born, I'll give you WIC, I'll give you food stamps, I'll give you vouchers, you know, this is my child. This child is a ward of the state. And for this child, I receive money. For this child, this is the state now. For this child, you receive money. For this child, you receive benefits. When a woman in slavery was having a lot of children, that's what master would do. And so for this reason, when you look up slave breeding, the women would brag. They would be like, master, I had 12 children for you, because this will equal benefits. Nothing has changed. This thought of welfare queen, although many nationalities are represented, but only one nationality is demonized. Go figure that. This is coming from this space and time, but I digress, and I'm going to continue so that I don't, you know, I'll continue. So I'm going to take a minute to drink some water. How you guys? Because this stuff is deep. So again, I already talked about you can't buy a slave. You have to make one. How do you make one? Violence, force, emotional exploitation. These were the tools to breaking the spirit. In the beginning, they said that, and it's true, Roman Emperor had slaves, the Grecians, Egypt, parts of Africa. All slavery is not a new institution. The level of chattel slavery to this degree, because there are also records that say that slaves were being sold internally into the Middle East, as well as externally into the West, you know. And so, hello, Valeria, how are you today? We're going over the roots review. This is not a normal review. I'm not going to rant and rave. I'm kind of trying to give historical facts so that you can take a look at it and do the work or research yourself, or we can do it collectively as a people. So I'm almost finished here. Yes, I got all of this out of the 2 hours that I was watching. And I got to give thanks, like I said, to just doing this LEV project, because it has opened up my mind so much. So back to the song, the soul song, when Kunta was singing the song, you know, sometimes you get in situations where a song will just come in your spirit that you haven't heard in so long, and you start humming it and singing it, and it brings some kind of peace to you. This is what a lot of the times the slaves would do, but it wasn't brand new to slavery. You see that song is a part of who we are, because we're a very soulful people. We're very animated people. Music makes us come alive. You understand? Music, the rhythm is in our very blood. And so when Kunta is remembering this song, it sparked something. It sparked something in Fiddler. He's like, wait up, hold up. I know that song. I know that song. I know that melody. And my grandmother used to sing it. And that's the connection. And I wanted to say, this is another reason why music is used as a weapon. Understand, for your children, how does this relate today? Because they know and study us for so long, and they know that music, we are so pulled into music, to that drum beat that you heard them beating when they forced them to play the drum on the thing and said, dance, dance. It is against our nature not to dance. If we hear boom, 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 we just start dancing. The baby in the womb start bouncing because it's in our very DNA. And they know that. So what do? You pollute it. And you use it to control. And this is what is happening. And so we can't just say, oh, I just like this song. Oh, I'm just listening to this song. Oh, I just like the way it sounds. You have to understand what it's doing to you, what it's doing to your children at a very cellular and soul vibrational level. Songs implant thoughts into your mind. You know, this is why when I go back and listen to a lot of the love songs, I'm like, this is depressing. It sounds like some codependent, sometimes narcissistic, you know, very imbalanced type of relationship. And we would sing it and identify it and project it in our reality. Be very careful about what you allow into your spirit, because like you said, in this case, you could have never heard the song for years. And once you hear that song come back again, you remember the thought, you remember where you was when you first heard it, you remember what you was doing, you remember who you was there, and that's the power of music. So I'm gonna continue. The horse scene, and I'm almost done here. I'm really almost done. Yep, I'm almost done. The horse scene, we see the European woman enter into this conversation. The wife of the master, she is now, remember, a lot of the stuff that's happening, keep in mind what you're buying, what slavery was producing. In the North, it produced something else. So we're just going to touch on Southern slavery. Cotton. What were you doing with the cotton? You were making things. What were you making? Some of the things you were making, mostly clothing, bedding, and stuff for your ships. You understand what I'm saying? To get more slaves. A lot of the European women were benefiting greatly because you see them big, fancy dress, you know, that they were dressing up in, and all of the extra fineries and niceties. This is where it's coming from. And so there is this kind of circle that's happening with the getting the goods and the desire to get the goods and wanting to please the woman and the ego. And so this woman now, she enters. She has Fiddler in this narrative like her lapdog, sending him out to people's estates so that he can bring back information and intel and acting like they down. But as soon as you don't do what I say, I'm going to guilt trip you. You may not have to beat Fiddler anymore, but I can guilt trip you into saying, after all I've done for you, after the way I've treated you, I can't imagine, Fiddler, that you would act this way. Now that's the emotional. People like house slaves had it better. And I know Mosai Rest and Malcolm X brought the house slave and the field Negro. And I've said this before in other videos. We have to re-examine that thought, because it was not easier for the house slave, because they had more things on top of being in constant contact with your oppressor on a daily basis, being subjugated to their every whim. Okay, sometimes sleeping like their lapdog on the foot of their bed, not having any time or any space to be you, and stuck between those outside who can identify and those inside who can't identify. It's not like, then we need to stop this. One is better than the other. Like they said in the underground, you're all slaves. Our foreparents were all slaves. So it's unnecessary. Some of these things we have to begin to break down so that we can get over these hurdles. Again, the whipping scene and the desire for him to say your name so that you know who you are. Say your name so you know who you are. This is what they kept saying to him. Say your name so you know who you are. And he knew who he was, but they were trying to, like you do on your computer, replace or erase prior memory. So this whipping scene, who everybody can't look at because of the physical brutality. Once you get beyond the physical brutality, there's the psychological that lasts way longer than the wounds. And how do we know? Because today, the person watching it is not The person watching it, hold on one second, please stop banging that. You're watching it, you're not physically being whipped, but you feel it at a soul level. And so, and again, everybody wanted the whipping to stop. When you're looking at you see Fiddler's face, you see the women's faces. Everybody want this whipping to stop, but they wanted it for different reasons. You understand what I'm saying? Everybody had their own reason. And just to let you know, all the people that gathered around, what they would do is send out these calls to action to tell the slave masters to send your slaves, because we're going to make an example of somebody. Send your slaves because we're going to help you. Each one help one. The slave masters was in a little union together. And each one is going to help one. So send your slaves over and we will show them a real life whipping. So this was the entertainment. So when this was the psychological warfare. If you even try it, this is what you can expect to happen to you. So I'm going to continue here. And I just spoke about it, the beating scene and what it did. And holidays, and we'd still do it today. It doesn't matter what the holiday is. You give quote unquote black people a holiday. It could be, the establishment of Nushka Kushka, and they make it a national holiday and you off. What you gonna do? You gonna barbecue? You gonna do that? That's a slave mentality. Because what happens is the enslaved did not care what holiday it was. All it meant to them was no work, maybe some barbecue. Master gonna give us a little trinket or something, and we could stay out of their space. So it represented in it. And Lewis Hughes speaks a little bit about holidays in this book, and we read it before. So for the sake of time, I'm not going to read it again. But he goes into holidays and what they meant for the slaves. So it's represented in Roots, because he's like, okay, the white folks, they're in the spirit, so they're really not going to be paying attention to you. So this is the little bit of time that you're going to have to be able to get away. Cain, it's psychological warfare when we have to understand it. It's like when you go to work and they be like, no work today. And you're like, yes, no work today. Why? Because you're not working for yourself. You're still feeling this enslaved mode. And the reality is, when we were in other places, and I'm one who says we were not all one monolithic people. There were different people represented on the shores of Africa. So whatever culture you came from, or whatever religious context, you are used to having market days, or you were used to having harvest days, or you were used to having times when you had a holiday. So all you did was transpose that need and that desire to be off from your labor and put it on whatever holiday the ruling class says it is. And lastly, when he tries to run away, of course, he gets caught. And he says something to Kunta, again, that name theme. Your name is your spirit. Your name is your shield. Your name is your vibration. Your name is your energy. He says to him, what's your name? He said, no, the one that your mother called you. The one that she whispered in your ear, the one that she told you as she was prepping you and bathing you. What's that name that resonates with you? And he turns to him and says, Henry, a lot of this wasn't in the original Roots. And what they're doing to me, as I have been, like I said, reading and going over this for so long, is that they're giving a level of humanity to the characters, to the institution of slavery, to say that, like I said, once again, it's not just as we're trying to make it. We're doing our own selves a disservice. You have other groups. You have the Jews who went through the Holocaust. You have other groups who say, never forget. It was a couple of years. And when they came out of that situation, they said, never forget. And we who have been in it for so long say, let's forget. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to see it. I don't want to hear it. We're doing ourselves a disservice. I love that we are not one monolithic people, many parts, many cultures. And Cain, Lashana, that's what I've learned so far. And so this is what I've shared. Thus, like Fiddler's access to the big house had to produce a dichotomous thought. And we saw that depicted in the underground. You had to become this person to the European, this person to your brother, and then in the middle is who you really were. So for people who tried to say, because you had on their clothing and you had on their shoes and you spoke the way they did, that in your soul, because remember, this ain't who you are. This is who you had to become to survive. It was a survival mechanism. But then there are some who were in the house who actually began to believe it. And this is where the problem came in and continues to come in this space and time. Many were forced to absorb, imitate, and perpetuate the behavior of the, quote, ruling class. And again, you see the disparity between the Irish and the so-called blacks, and you see the brutality. A lot of this brutality, it came from somebody who was an indentured slave, somebody who was poor, somebody who felt that, you know, at least I have somebody else to oppress, somebody else who's not as lowly as I am. And Shalian says, oh, what's up, Shalian? How you doing? And establish ways to make sure the people never forget. Exactly. They got memorials, they got museums, they got conversations, they got all of these things to make sure they never forget. But when we have things like this, we see it as an insult, we see it as problematic, we see it as something that we don't want to engage in because it's too painful. But the reality is, once we process our way through that pain, promise you there's power on the other side. There's a thought out there in the self-help field. You take your pain and you make it power. How do you do that? You transmute the energy, because pain is energy and power is energy. So when you learn how to transmute your pain into power, you have now arrived in the sense of, I can have this conversation. I can look you straight in the eye and not blink. I am not looking away. I am not afraid. And I am ready to get beyond this point. And a lot of us, based on social media, if you're on social media and you see it, and this is not hype, you will see, oh no, I don't want to see, I don't want to look, I don't want to hear, that's too much, let's get on to this, let's get on to that. And the reality is, we're walking around with a limp. Some people are walking around, you know, with more than a limp. So basically, breaking the will and breaking the spirit is what I derived out of this. And stay tuned for episode 2. So I'm gonna end it there. It was sponsored by, I started doing what it's sponsored by. This review right here, if you like it, share it. Please share it if you like it. If you're on social media, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, you like it, you felt value from it, feel free to share it so we can have this community conversation on an ongoing. Again, the LEV project is going 6 months strong. So this is part of it. We're not stopping anytime soon. You understand? Most I give us breath and health and strength. We're going to keep going. This was sponsored by the LEV project, of course, and Kane Boutique, which is cultural boutique, is just something, again, which is restoring the culture, restoring parts of who we are with modest and affordable dress. So definitely check out the link on that, Kane Cultural Boutique, as well as the Soul Center, Take Time to Learn, and SOULONOMiCS. And the Soul Center is coming soon, but Take Time to Learn and SOULONOMiCS is what I do. And once again, if you have a business out there, I got to put this on the end so we can make this continue to go, that you would like to sponsor a segment such as this, hit me up, Amuna Yisrael, on all social media, or info@amunayisrael.com, and I will get over to you a way in which you can affordably, and so that we talk about building economics. And I often broadcast off of Big Up Yourself, Dr. Boyce Watkins' channel, and he does an excellent job of speaking about community economics. And this is one of the ways that we can do it, by sharing what it is that we're doing in a positive manner and getting it to those who it can help and aid. So with that said, I know that was long, right? With that said, I want to thank you guys for sticking with me through this long narrative. And I hope you were able to get something from it, because I get many things from it. So when you sit down tonight, don't just get stuck in your feelings, because oftentimes when we're not trained, that's what we're going to do. We're going to be like, oh man. But here's the thing. They made it because we're here. They made it. We made it. We're still standing on their shoulders. We're still here. And it's our responsibility to never forget and to process, so that our children, my children are listening. You hear them in the background. I want them to know this. I want them to know where we're coming from, not just to say it in a cliche type of manner, but to be able to internalize the power and the strength that is in you as a people to overcome. And this ain't hype. Bless up yourself, Stephanie. This is real, but we have to put in the work. So until next time, which most I will be tomorrow. My name is Amuna Yisrael. Everybody have a blessed thing. I'm hyped. This is my subject right here. So I goes in. I'll talk to you guys soon. Check out the links in the box. Link me up if you want. And feel free to share, like I said, and subscribe to the channel. It's at the top on Friday Nubian Queens. And it's also here on YouTube. So until next time, one.